Time to check in with Amanda Lang. She is our regular contributor on Friday afternoons when we talk business. You can hear her show, Taking Stock, anywhere on the iHeart Radio network. So, Amanda, this week, some good news, at least on the inflation front for Canada. 2.9% for the month of January, down fairly significantly, one might say, from 3.4% the month before. What does it mean? And what does it mean, more importantly, as far as interest rates go?
Yeah, good news in the sense, Aaron, that it was not just that headline, which of course takes us down below 3%. And, close watchers of the bank will remember that although we talk about 2%, it's actually a 2 to 3% band that they target. So we are in range here. That's really good news. And of course, once again, it was led by gasoline. We've seen that in recent reports. And people like to strip out food and gas and energy prices because they tend to be volatile month to month. But we all put that stuff in our car. So I would say the fact that gas was lower is good for our pocketbooks. And to your point about where it leaves the central bank, closer to the goal, right? So they still expect some choppiness. If you told me that inflation was above 3% next month, I don't think anybody would die of shock from that. But we're trending in the right direction, and I think they'll be very happy with what they're seeing on the internals of all of this data.
Yeah, I will mention, by the way, on the U.S. side, because I always sort of bring that up, they, of course, a lot of people have been forecasting the Fed to cut rates by as early as March. That seems like it's now off the table. Inflation, they're still running pretty hot, so maybe now June. But I have to ask, because whether you follow business or not, the big story of this week, it's everywhere, is what happened with NVIDIA, where a company can basically in one day see its net worth market value increase by $250 billion. What's this about?
Yeah, I mean, really extraordinary. NVIDIA is hitting on a couple of really sweet spots. It happens to be at the leading edge of innovation. So it makes computer chips, and it had always been a big player in chips that need a lot of heavy graphics. So it was big in the gaming industry. People who are gamers know that you lead the way in terms of the high quality of the imagery. NVIDIA, because it's playing there, is the chip that will drive AI. AI needs a lot of that kind of high-end technology, so they can charge a lot. Bottom line, they're making a ton of money. Is the stock move justified? I mean, I would say you're kind of actually marrying up just the classic, this is a company that's doing well and profits growing fast, so it's a good stock, with the kind of, the Reddit phenomenon of retail investors piling in. There's a combination of both of those things happening. So maybe it's overshot, maybe it hasn't. It definitely blew the doors off its recent quarter, no question.
All right, let's move to here. What we're hearing as far as grocery store prices are concerned, the changing nature of people's shopping habits when it comes to grocery stores. So let's start first of all, the headline, Jagmeet Singh taking on Galen Weston, the NDP's crusade to bring down corporate greed. The government can talk forever about wanting to do something and needing to do something, but at the end of the day, nothing seems to have changed here, right? You hear a lot of talk, a lot of lip service being paid, from people who run these companies to say they're going to try to manage their costs, they're going to pass them on, but nothing really seems to have happened, has it?
Well, it hasn't for a really good reason, which is that they're not really to blame. I mean, we do have multiple sort of market reports, including from our Competition Bureau and the federal government, showing that there isn't profiteering happening by grocers. There is inflation, and they are passing on inflation, but they're not gouging us. And yet, where does Jagmeet Singh come into it? It's easy politics. It's low-hanging fruit to say somehow the grocers are to blame, and if I were Prime Minister, I would fix it. The truth is, Jagmeet Singh could be Prime Minister. He still couldn't make the grocers do anything but what they're doing, which is trying to make a living. And they do it. They make, at the best of times, 3% margins. And by the way, we're just talking about NVIDIA, chip maker with a great product everybody wants. Its margins are 76%. So just by way of comparison, you could be doing something else and make a lot more money. Grocers live on the edge, and when they get a price increase from their producers, they have to pass it on, or they won't stay in business, bottom line. So do they make money? Yes, they do. Do we want them to be making money? Yes, we do, because we want grocers in this country. So it's one of these stories that we will keep talking about it. It's a political one. They're easy targets, but I think, a little bit unfair in the face of the facts.
Are we starting to see, by the way, and I know this came up originally, this idea of some companies not in Canada right now looking at the market here and thinking, well, maybe this isn't a bad place to consider being?
I doubt it, but I will say we have heard the industry minister say he's inviting international competition. I would be intrigued if we saw big players come into this market. It's a hard market. And as I say, the margins are low. The expense is high to build new stores. We have seen already some big U.S. players, and Target is the one that most of us will think of first, coming into this market and not doing that well. And there are a lot of reasons for that, including we've got sort of this broad geography. There's a reason why we have a few big players in the grocery business, and that's because they have to offset money-losing stores in small jurisdictions with the money makers in the big cities. We do want to find solutions for that, and that is something the Competition Bureau has flagged. There are things we might do, including, they have provisions in their leases that keep other grocers from building a store nearby. We might look at some of that stuff to force them to be a little bit more competitive. But overall, I would be shocked if the big grocers internationally were clamoring to come here.
Okay, and to what I originally asked, the second part of that first question, as far as Canadians changing their shopping habits in grocery stores. So we have a new survey that shows that almost 30% of Canadians have in fact changed their shopping habits when it goes to buying groceries.
Yeah, really interesting. This is the survey from Dalhousie's Agri-Food Analytics Lab looking at what we do in the face of kind of these prices that are still persistently high. And in fact, even though we saw inflation come down this month, grocery inflation is still 3.4%. So we're still feeling it. And they said 60% of Canadians will look for discounts on food products. They'll look for expiring clearance items, and a full 30% of us will change stores if we can find it in another store. So that speaks to, theoretically that we're willing to hunt around. Now, I will say it does still benefit the biggest players because, you might switch stores, but you might still be with the same company, right? Loblaws has several brands under its umbrella. So does Metro, so does Sobeys. And when you go to a cheaper product, this is interesting, Aaron, in the most recent quarter, Loblaws reported its profit was up because we're buying its private label because we want the cheaper private label goods, and that benefits the company. So in some ways, by giving us the discount products, they're still making money.
Yeah, I will point out, I think I heard a story just today, as a matter of fact, that, and I think it's Provigo here, changing the kinds of stores it's going to be opening as it continues to expand with more less expensive brands like Maxi, for example. So they've taken note of this, and they're changing the way they do business.
And as is Loblaws. Loblaws is also expanding, building 40 new stores across the country, and they will focus on that lower end too. We've seen this in recent years, right? Dollarama is another example of a company that's done well on our feeling that we want to get value. And I think this is probably going to be a trend that stays with us, especially those of us who are kind of scarred a little bit by these higher prices. The last few years have been hard, right? A lot of our expenses that we can't really select away from, like food or our rent or mortgage, have gone up in ways that we didn't really anticipate. So I do think that kind of discount category is likely to do well as long as that's still fresh in our memories.
All right, and then let's close off with this piece of news, which is not going to be fun for people who've been working from home for a while. So there are new rules in place from Canada Revenue around working from home, which is going to make it, you say, harder to claim expenses?
Yeah, or it'll take it back to the way it used to be. So post-pandemic, CRA made it really easy to claim your home expenses by just saying, look, calculate $2 a day for every day you were at home, and don't worry about sort of showing the ratio of heat and, your electricity bill, et cetera. Now they're going back to the old ways, which is, you need to prove from your employer that you had to be at home. So that's a form. I think it's a T2200, but there's a form you have to fill out and your employer has to sign. And then you actually have to calculate exactly what your expenses were in the home for the time that you were there. So in other words, more complicated. I think people that are moving to a hybrid work solution longer term just will kind of get in a groove of getting used to what they have to do. But it is definitely going to be more complicated than what some people were used to for the last couple of years.
Yeah, so now you can use that time at home to spend more time at home figuring out why you have expenses from working at home.
Right,
okay.
to do your taxes.
Amanda, thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend.